live, and everybody on here. We've got Josh Boykin and Dennis Clayman and myself, Charles Tendo. We were all talking about different things that have happened in the world as of this last week, and it's been pretty eventful and a lot of fun, or a lot of, well, what would be a good word for that? I don't even know.
WTF, man. Just like it
Yeah,
sounds.
exactly. Just like
Yeah.
WTF. Because we've had mass shootings, which spurred a lot of different things. We've had the president come and give us his opinion. We've had just people that have just lost their minds, in my opinion. So, I don't even really know where to start. I mean, of course, there was the shooting in San Bernardino. The day of the shooting or during the shooting, we were getting ridiculous reports. We were getting, a group of 3 guys kicked in the door with military gear and just went to town. And then we find out that it is this couple that is from, where are they from? Iran?
Don't recall.
I think they were originally, let's see.
Or Syria. Maybe they're from Syria. I don't know. I don't really remember where it said that they were from, where this couple was. But anyway, my first thing was, okay, we got another shooting in America. This has gotten out of control. But, this time we happen to have a shooting at a soft target that's a government facility where just so happens SWAT was down the street. Like, to me, it was, well, I guess that's convenient. We just had SWAT down the street that was prepared for all of this, so all of the cops went from their fun training exercise to a real-world environment, and I didn't really understand, what was going on at first. All I knew was it was just, somebody shot up this Christmas party.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we talked about this a little earlier, that the the difficulty with this is that it just seems like so much of it is a strange coincidence. One of those almost stranger than fiction type scenarios. There's been a lot of confusion about how you go from descriptions of three white males to finding 2 coincidentally, Syed Farouk, the couple, I believe, were originally born in the States and had recently returned from the Middle East, and
Well,
so it's a little bizarre.
Well, I know that the husband, the guy, he was an American, and he traveled to the Middle East because his parents were trying to find him a wife, and that's where he found the woman, and they had returned. But it was still really kind of odd to me to be like, well, we've got these 3 white males are doing their thing here, and then we have no idea. And Jordan actually pointed this out when it was all going down. Jordan was like, wait a minute, you're out here and you're giving the bad guys exactly what they want, and now they know exactly where you are and they know exactly how to get out, but we lost contact with them. Nobody knew where they were, who they were, and then all of a sudden this black SUV, and it was a joke because we were driving around listening to this, and it was a joke with us, and we were like, black SUV, look over there, it's a black SUV. Look over there, it's a black SUV. It's like,
Kind of the same description as a tall black male, and you're like, oh, that's helpful. That's really
right?
helpful.
Not average height, average build, black.
Right.
Like, well,
Armed and highly dangerous.
yeah, and it's so then you all of a sudden you get this random report. Hey, the cops are chasing this black SUV. Okay, way to go, cops! If all of you were on a training exercise, and the majority of you were on a training exercise, you mustered up a serious force to chase down this car and gun them down. Dead men tell no tales.
That's probably the part that is frustrating to me, and I understand every situation is unique. Obviously, I wasn't there to see the dynamics of what happened or who shot whatever. But in the wake of the shooting in Colorado, where we have a guy who was, successfully detained after shooting a number of people. I believe one of them was a police officer. I really
Well,
just would have.
that's a Planned Parenthood guy, right? The warrior for babies.
Yeah, yeah. I just was like, well, this was one time it would have been really helpful to have them alive because obviously the conjecture that will come as a result of this particular shooting is just. I mean, that's the thing. Nobody knows. It's all speculation, and how two people who um, they say that Farouk, Syed Farouk, was working at the location and left the party angrily and then returned with his wife, and they had apparently a number of pipe bombs and things that they had already left there. Like, I don't think people generally just have those things lying around for their, just like, hey, it was Black Friday sale on pipe bombs, and
Yeah, it was at
uh,
Walmart.
Well,
yeah,
hang on a sec. So let me ask. You said that um, there were reports that he had left angry. Who did they ask? One of the questions that Charles asked earlier this week was who was interviewed, who survived, and who was interviewed, and we couldn't find any of those interviews. So, how did they determine that he had left angry? Who did they interview to find that out?
I do think it's I haven't kept a constant eye on the watch or on the news coverage, but it does seem really interesting that we haven't found any kind of key eyewitnesses, people who can kind of testify to these are the things that happened, these are the people that were there. Even character, we haven't even really seen like character witnesses, people who would say
Even
like, yeah, this
all
was
the normal people that were like, I was there, I got shot at.
right.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you would think that the media would be kind of, in a frenzy to find these people and figure out who, who was connected to these things. An article in the LA Times just published. I talked about Enrique Marquez, who
The neighbor guy.
apparently, yes, a neighbor who bought the guns.
Which is something else like this whole thing seems like a made for TV movie going on right now. I mean, it's we have no eyewitnesses that have been interviewed by the media, because you see that the media would have been all over that like a fat kid on a cupcake. But then you see and no disrespect to any fat kids out there, because I'm all over cupcakes myself, but um,
That
the
cupcake love.
right. But you see out there that it's really kind of like, well, wait a minute. First, you guys were like all over their apartment. How does that happen? How can you be a news media person that's allowed to just go and romp through an active crime scene that's under investigation? Because at that point, we still didn't know enough about these people or what was going on. It was just like, here are the keys, go for it. But then we hear the story. He got angry and he left the party and then came back. Okay, you got angry, left the story, and came back. Who said that?
Who
Where did
said
that
that?
information come from?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
now, the New York Times posted, and it's interesting because if you look at it from different news sources, and I kind of post them up on Facebook sometimes, but if you look at it from different news sources, we have this other guy I think he's from Nigeria, who was there, who comes back and he says, hey, this isn't the right guy. Somebody called me to tell me that this was the person, and I couldn't believe it. And he goes on to describe everything that's going on there, and in one of his statements, he makes it seem like it couldn't have been him, that it wasn't him, that the build of the people that were there didn't match him. This is a scrawny little Middle Eastern guy and his wife that weighs 100 pounds soaking wet, and that doesn't match the three guys that was originally described. So it's getting weird. And then we have the convenient neighbor who straw purchased firearms for them in California, of all places, with the strictest gun laws on the planet.
Well, I would bet they didn't buy it in California.
You think?
Yeah,
Huh.
imagine that.
Well, I
Uh,
mean,
what
I
about
thought
the
it.
FBI reports?
What FBI reports? There are FBI reports?
Yeah, the FBI was doing investigation on their computer
Oh,
and their Facebook page and whatever else.
Well, I had heard that they had gone all out on that one, where they had gotten the computer, they had gone after
Hmm.
the cell phones, but all of them had been destroyed, and conveniently the hard drives had all been removed from these computers, so they
Oh,
didn't have
really?
any of that evidence. At least that's what I keep hearing out on Fox.
Oh, I had heard
Fox.
that they had gotten access to the Facebook page and I guess Twitter accounts and discovered conversations about planning some event, and not just this one here, an event at a local school in Recindo, I think it was.
Really?
Recindo? Yeah.
Huh.
They had pictures on their cell phone. So that's why I'm kind of curious. You said the cell phones were destroyed. They found pictures on the cell phone showing pictures of that high school that they were talking about. So that makes me wonder about the FBI reports. I don't know how to take that particular angle.
See, this is the part that concerns slash worries me, right? Is that we as the American public only have, we don't have direct access to any of these things. We don't, we're not FBI investigators. We're not, um, on the ground journalists. We have to gather our information from whatever sources we're able to find. And it seems like nobody can get the same story about what's really happened or
Yeah,
what's gone down.
totally.
That's probably the part that is the most disconcerting for me is that we know people were shot and killed, right? We know that, I mean, there was this tragedy that took place. We know that it was kind of out of the blue, but other than that, it seems like no two places can convey the same story consistently. And of course, you've got issues between your mainstream media and then kind of your smaller outlets, your blogs, and anybody with a decent WordPress template can publish something that people will take as reputable. I often talk about megankelly.org if you've ever been there. megankelly.org is a blog.
Like the Fox News reporter?
That's exactly what you're supposed to think. megankelly.org it's a blog, and I swear, let's see if it's still here, because I was kind of offended, and I'm not some sort of Megan Kelly devotee or whatever, but the idea is that regardless of the outlet you work for, whether you're on how do you, I apparently have not spelled her name correctly. So regardless of the outlet you work for, when you achieve a certain amount of clout, there's a value in that clout, whether you're Megan Kelly or
Why?
Sean Hannity or any of these big name commentators, Jon Stewart. Your name matters, and so anybody who can find a way to use that name to kind of push their own agenda will go ahead and do so. Um, I guess I'm just a little more frustrated that we can't seem to figure out um, what the credible sources of information are and what it is we're actually supposed to be paying attention to right now. Because my big frustration is that I haven't really found a suggested action to resolve these situations, right? I mean, we can talk about more gun control or less gun control or whatever, but legislation for anything isn't going to happen. So what do we do on an individual basis to try and stop these things from happening?
Well, I mean, I agree with you that most of the time we've got like for me, I've got from anonymous is news feed to various different underground news places to all these different places, and I'm that person who when I see something hit a headline on a major news place, as someone who's dealt with the media, who's dealt with those people directly, I know that there's so much more information there than what they're doing. I know for a fact that it's infotainment, that they're looking for the raciest, juiciest piece of information to get people to click on their article to read it so that they can sell ads and do all that other stuff. But they're not actually producing the whole story. So I go out and I try and source things and find the facts about information and see as much as I can. And I've just like you, I found completely conflicting stories from one place to another, and I haven't gotten into it yet, but we still haven't heard from anybody there. we still haven't heard about their Facebook pages, you know. And I bet you if you were to go and look at these people's Facebook pages, I bet you they're closed now. They're gone. They're missing. You know, it happened. I mean, if we rewind back to the Sandy Hook school shooting, you know, you remember that there was a big controversy about stuff that was getting deleted off of the government websites about a mass shooting having to do with children before the incident happened. Or I think there was a missed timeline where the guy said that, you know, hey, he was mourning for his daughter, or setting up a page for his daughter before, you know, he knew his daughter was dead, like while the Sandy Hook shooting was going on. Or the other one where there was video of him, you know, smiling and joking with the cameras right before the cameras kicked on. So there's so much more information. There's stuff happening on either side of that keyboard that you just don't know about, and you have to go and find it. And when you find it, you're kind of freaked out by, hey, where can I get credible news? Where can I get information? And people trust the talking heads. They really do. They trust you know Bill O'Reilly and his insane spin, which is interesting. If anybody's been paying attention to him, he is like kissing Trump's butt like it's going out of style. Like I was listening to his program the other day and was amazed. It was just like, wow, man.
Yeah, that guy's a little over the top even for me.
That's saying a lot.
So you know, I want to add on to this. We're talking about how finding the right source for something like San Bernardino is disconcerting, and I think to your point, Josh, it's a much bigger issue than that, right? In that this very issue is across the board with any news story you hear out there. And that's really WTF America, right? It's like you pick any particular incident, take any particular issue, and try and find a reliable news source on that, and you can't. You can't make a good decision about any issue that's raised in the news today.
Nope.
But do people want to make an informed decision, or do they just want to stick to that herd mentality and just chase it down the appropriate path?
But I think part of the problem is that there isn't a lot of. I think that when you are news or media savvy, when you're a participant in the media, it's easier to see some of those warning signs, right? You can tell when something is. You get that kind of itch that's like, oh, I think I'm reading something that's inherently biased. Like, maybe I should go get a couple extra sources. But I don't think the majority.
I mean, we would do that. I don't think the majority of people do that. I mean, it's taken me, I don't know, 5 years to get Dee to actually start doing that, because she's posted up like Onion articles, and I was like, you know, this is the Onion, right?
Right.
So I think in general people don't do that.
No, and I completely agree. I think that when you are a regular participant in some of those things that are going on, it's easier to see. I do game journalism and criticism, but it's still I'm still part of the journalistic process. I've still posted things to websites, reviewed things that are posting to websites, and have an understanding of how the system works. I think that a lot of maybe the trust in the media is still kind of tied back to an era that realistically was not that long ago. We talk about Web 2.0 as the evolution of the comment section and the blog, and that really has changed the way that media takes place in the world. But I think that a lot of people who aren't necessarily super technologically savvy, a lot of people who haven't started their own blog, who haven't done their own podcast, don't necessarily understand how easy it is to create your own blog or to start your own podcast and to have it look relatively credible, even if all you're doing is shilling lies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the places where people need to understand, like, okay, I got some information from this blog, but now I need to maybe go check and see this other thing. Maybe I need to cross-reference this with something that has a .gov email address, or, hey, this is supposed to be from Megyn Kelly. Maybe I should check Fox News. Of note, by the way, I'm sorry, now that I'm looking this up again, I'm even more frustrated. The article is called "The Confederate Flag Needs to Be Raised, Not Lowered."
Whoa!
This was an article that was written as we were having the discussions about whether or not the Confederate flag should fly over the state courthouse down south. pardon me, and I saw this show up on Facebook. It was one of the, you know how Facebook likes to say, hey, your friend's friend's friend left a comment on this, and just puts it in front of you as if somehow that makes it relevant. And so this article shows up, and there's this big stream of people who are talking about, well, I have respect for Megyn Kelly for speaking her opinion and blah blah blah, and you know it's not popular, but frankly somebody should be honest, and kind of the same way that honesty-based, quote-unquote, honesty-based vitriol has made Trump very popular, in my opinion. Anyway, so I click this link, right, because to me, if Megyn Kelly, who's one of the most popular commentators on Fox News, had written an article about the Confederate flag needing to be raised, it wouldn't have shown up on a friend of a friend of a friend talked about this. It would have been blowing up on trending topics. It would have been all over Twitter. It would have been everywhere, right? So the Confederate flag needs to be raised, not lowered. You can type Confederate flag Megyn Kelly into Google, and it comes up with an article that called the Confederate flag should be raised, or the Confederate flag needs to be raised, not lowered. It's from megynkelly.org.
The unofficial Megyn Kelly. Yep.
Yeah, and when you click that link, it takes you somewhere completely different. They have removed that blog's site from existence. The comments thread from Discus is still archived at over 2,000 comments, and when you click the Discus link, it also goes to somewhere completely different. They've completely removed this page from existence, and yet, like, people are still out there thinking that this was an opinion that Megyn Kelly had. This was a huge point of debate. It went viral with over 2,000 comments.
I see that's the point, though. And I mean, I've watched, like, there's a technique out there where it's, I forget what it's actually called, but it's, Facebook has enabled people to be able to do this on a very rapid scale. Like, all you need to do is to make it look like people care about the crap that you're spewing, and more people will begin to connect to it. If you know, you can make a viral video, and I mean, maybe I'm the only one who's seen it so far. It's become Facebook has become one of those sneaky little sponsored ad people. Like, I clicked on something the other day and was like, oh, okay, and then I was trying to figure out, well, who posted this, and I went back and it was like, oh, it's sponsored because, like you said, a friend of a friend of a friend of a cousin of a friend's best friend's sister just talked about it. And I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. Why is this relevant to me? But it was interesting enough for me to click on. So there is some validity there. But it turns out, you know, it's again, people are going to consume what's put in front of them, and there are methods out there. And as someone who's controlled the internet, not necessarily controlled it, but works on the internet a lot, you can see where people, where it's very, very easy to generate a very small buzz and turn it into a very large message, and then control that content. Now, if the people who still control those Google links as to where the Megyn Kelly fake blog post goes to, pointed it somewhere else to like another legitimate article, or even just wanted it to be talked about for a little bit, it accomplishes a couple of things. One, the Confederate flag thing still becomes an issue. Two, Megyn Kelly, did Megyn Kelly ever come out and say, I didn't make this statement, I didn't say this, I didn't do any of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
She may not be aware of it.
You know, I can't help but imagine that there are some situations where you would find out about it and then you just pretend it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because I mean, Megyn Kelly's fan base, which and I hate to say fan base because I on one hand I want to have some respect as a, I don't want it to seem like it's like, oh, it's just a celebrity thing, but a lot of this is cult of personality. So, I mean, a lot of her fan base stands to be kind of turned off, right? If she comes out and says, hey, wait a second, I didn't say that. You know, that was not me. Why would I say something like that? That would be irresponsible. Or, you know what, I didn't write that, but you know what, I sure believe it, or whatever. Right now, you've got theoretical, you know, you've got no culpability. And so you get to pretend that it doesn't exist. But I can't imagine that Megyn Kelly herself, like even Megyn Kelly's mom, right, would be like, hey, I saw that you said this thing on Facebook. And then Megyn Kelly's like, wait a minute.
Well, hold on. I don't know that I would go that far. I mean, just because it's on Facebook doesn't mean the majority of the population has seen that. Just because it went viral doesn't mean the majority of the population has seen that. right?
I guess I feel
I think that is one of the issues that we have today is that we have groups of people that will see something and explode it, but it's really only a subset. I just saw an article the other day. This woman, she's a reporter. She's very big. This is back during Nixon. She's a very popular reporter, and she was into the scenes and everything, right? And she was completely dumbfounded how Nixon won by a landslide. She had no idea. She said she didn't vote for him, and no one she knows voted for him. How in the heck did he possibly win? It's like, so do you think that just because you don't know anybody, that it's not possible that there are people who do? Right? And I think this is the same thing that we're talking about here, where we have a scenario like this where everybody in the world or everybody in the United States or everybody on Facebook, right, knows about that issue. And I don't think that's true.
Well, I think that conceptually we're talking about the same idea, right? That you assume that your particular group of whatever is representative of the whole mass, right?
Oh, right, yeah. That's always the case, right?
Right. But I think that the difference or the catch here would be that, and I am making an assumption here, and we all know what they say about assumptions. Yeah. But I would assume that if I were Megyn Kelly, if I were, I don't know, I mean, if I were Michael Jordan, if I were anybody who has a significant amount of fame or notoriety, I would have people on my payroll who would be getting Google alerts when my name shows up.
You don't even really need people on your payroll to do that. Setting up a Google alert is extremely simple. But
well, right, but I mean, I wouldn't want to do that myself if I were, you know, if you're that big, I would imagine I would pay somebody else to do it, right? Yeah. Because I mean, you have other things that you should be doing, right? You're supposed to be out there making news and being on TV shows and hopefully seeing your family.
Not necessarily responding to every instance where someone is trying to use your name.
Absolutely, but I would still think that there would be and I think that actually goes along with it, right? Is that just because somebody used her name, she could be completely knowledgeable of the situation and still decide, you know what, this just isn't something I'm gonna mess with because I don't have to, you know.
Are we using the same argument about Muslim extremists and Islam, and by not denouncing or separating yourself from it, you're somehow a party to it?
No, I think that it's just that you have to be selective about the situations in which you are going to respond, period. And then when you do respond, how you respond to those situations, right? So if we were to take Muslim extremism to kind of tie back, if we were to take Muslim extremism takes place and you see this instant outpouring from all of these different Islamic organizations that say, wait a second, we don't condone this. This isn't what we think. This isn't how we believe. This is not what our religion teaches. These are not the things that we're trying to do. Right? Like, that's a situation where you have to get up and say, yes, like this, hey, wait a second, that's not me, because otherwise people are going to make assumptions that do not benefit you or the people in your organization or the people you care about. You know, in contrast, you know, MegynKelly.org is not Megyn Kelly, right? And unless Megyn Kelly wants to get together and say, this is how we have a discussion about responsible journalism and being a responsible consumer of journalism, which I wish somebody would have a discussion about, until they decide that that was something they're interested in doing, there's just no reason to have that discussion. You know, it doesn't harm Megyn Kelly's professional reputation to just let that thing float out in the ether, because a large portion of her fan base either doesn't know it exists or we're not particularly offended by its existence. If there were some sort of situation where Fox News or Megyn Kelly stood to lose money or public clout by the existence of this piece, I'm sure they would have said something about it. I'm pretty sure somebody in the organization must know, and they just opted not to, because in the grand scheme of things, it's just a blog.
Well, even still, I mean, it's an active blog. It's something that's actually moving, and it is posting or proposing as a news thing. And if you look at it, it does say the unofficial Megyn Kelly. So you know, they're protecting themselves from there. But, you know, as someone who owns, you know, CharlesTendell.com, if somebody went out there and did charlestendale.org and started posting, here's the easiest way to get hacked by, give me your credit card information and so on and so forth, I would be directly against that. I, as an individual, have had people that have taken my videos, my interviews, and have used them to promote their business. And I'm very well aware that they exist. And I went out to each one of them and said, hey, you haven't gotten my permission to use this. And when I do that, they shut it down. Now, it looks like it's been shut down for this Megyn Kelly thing, but it's still an example of, that herd mentality. People didn't question the validity of the information. They didn't go and look to find out. They didn't want to approach Megyn Kelly to hold Megyn Kelly responsible or say, hey, what is this? Did you say this? They didn't question the source of the information. They just took the information and went with it, and it reignited the Confederate flag argument. And it's just the main one, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems about what's going on with the mass media these days. We don't know whether what we're hearing is legitimate, what we're seeing is legitimate, whether it's just a way to sell me an ad or a new sleep number bed, or whether it's something, just, hey, these guys, they just know they don't have to put out actual information anymore.
Well, hold on a sec. Yeah, let's change that around just a little bit. Let's not necessarily put all of the responsibility on the people. I agree that people need to have responsibility to question the validity of the media source. I think the bigger issue, the responsibility, belongs to the media source in the first place. Well, I don't know what we can do about that, right? But I think that the media, as a reliable source of real information, has gone downhill since when? 50s or 60s, right? When did it start really going downhill? And we started having. Did you see that that review of the major media where they were talking about the number of facts that are reported versus the number of commentary sessions that are had on each of the major stations?
No, I didn't. I mean, but as someone,
I think that's significant, because it's like, I'm going to pick on them in particular because I thought it was a shocking number. They pointed out that MSNBC has, like, of all of the reports that they give, 15% of them are fact-based reports. 85% of their reports are commentary. It's like, if I wanted your opinion on the news, then that's what I acknowledge that I'm getting. But I think what's been happening is when folks view that commentary, they view it as fact. It's like, no, it's really just their opinion. It may have some fact behind it, but ultimately it's their opinion. And if you just accept their opinion, well, you need to understand that that's what's happening, as opposed to just taking the facts and making your own opinion.
I mean, that's going to be kind of the natural consequence of a 24-hour news cycle, though. There are only so many physical, there are only so many, and I guess physical is the wrong word, but there are only so many tangible facts that you can gather to compare to the amount of content that you have to create to fill a 24-hour news cycle. We could have an entire show about the way in which the 24-hour news cycle has destroyed the credibility of a number of I think really of journalism and media as a whole.
Yeah.
There's just no physical way with enough information.
That's again, we're all in agreement that that's the problem. Here's the fact: the sky is blue. Here's how I feel about the sky being blue today, and this, that, and the other. They have to do that in order to make it entertaining. But I don't want
somebody's got to come up and talk about, the sky might be red.
The sky
you saying that it's blue is
the reflection of light in this part of the world. I understand they're going to be supporting comments and all those other things, but we've stopped being a society of people that say, well, so wait, what's the core here? What's the fact here? The fact is the sky is blue. Well, for most of us, it's blue. Okay, that's just the way of the world. So what other additional information do I want from that? So there's not a way for a news organization to say, this is the fact, this is what we know. And that's what we've been talking about, or at least we started to talk about, was the San Bernardino shooting. At the beginning, we kept hearing that this is what we know. No one, and then we had commentary and we had experts, and we had all these different people that gave their opinions of different things, different faucets, and different things that might have taken place there, and speculations. But when it comes down to this is what we know, they were still speculating, and they were presenting that information as fact. Now, where they were getting that information is the problem. They didn't act like I've seen. I don't know if either of you have watched some of the interesting gun control debates that have happened out there. I've seen people go out there and no, there was a commentator on just the San Bernardino one. And I think he was on CNN or CNBC or something like that. I can't even remember what news organization he was on, but it was one of the big ones. And he's sitting there and he starts describing what he calls the bullet button on the side of the gun.
Oh, right.
And I was like, wait, what did you just say? It's like it's a button that you depress that makes it go from, you know, a semi-automatic to a fully automatic. And I'm like, dude, you have just confused two totally different technologies in the state of California. You know, and people like gun people that understand how an AR-15 works. Okay, they understand that he had made a serious mistake, and you know, people started talking bad about him. But the general public are like the anti-gunners are all like, oh well, there's your problem right there. And now we're in an environment where the facts are beginning to push the narrative. The opinions and the misinformation is pushing the narrative. It's pushing the information. It's pushing the entertainment portion. So now we've got people that are just kicking in the door on gun control, which, I'm sorry, this took place in California, which has some of the most ludicrous gun control laws on the planet. But, you know, that people ignore that. You know, we even had was it the Republican senator from there who came out and said, "Oh, look, our gun control is working. This is a shining example of how gun control works." You know, we did all of this.
She's a Democrat.
Oh, sorry, Democrat.
I just want to be clear.
You know, but that's the problem. Is there's so much information and there's so much commentary, there's so much data in between what really is going on here, people, and what I think is going on here, that people aren't able to get a clear message. So, you know, from San Bernardino, like we started, we got three white males in full military getup. They look like they're mercenaries. They're built, they're cut. They walk through the door with AK-47s. I'm sorry, even if you're not a gun nut, even if you're not a gun person, you can visually tell the difference between an AK-47 and an AR-15. I mean, most people can. If you've seen any Samuel L. Jackson movie, you totally know what an AK-47 looks like, right?
That's the best they is.
Yeah. You absolutely, positively have to kill everybody in the room, except
no substitutes.
You know, but that's the problem. You know, is the story, the information that was dropped on us didn't get fact checked. People were like, "Oh my God, another shooting!" And then we sprinkle in, "Oh, they happen to be Muslim." Whoops! Like, wow! And that has spiraled into an entire. I don't even know how I'd have a word for it. But now, I mean, did either of you see the video recently of the woman who there were a group of Muslims that were in a public park and they were praying. And I forget when they were praying, but they were praying, and once they finished praying, this woman approached them and told them that they was the devil, and you know, they were terrorists and they didn't want anybody to come, and then assaults them. You know, and the guy got it all on video. And you know, America, we've become that people just because of what else is going on in the world and the information that's being pushed and published about you know, people that fit a certain characteristic.
And we've also, I mean, colloquially, you know, have heard the stories about, you know, Muslim Americans who've been called ISIS, right? And you know, particularly in schools where these kids have been teased or attacked for being, you know, we're in attack the other mode, right? You'd have to be living under a rather sizable rock to have not seen at least one of the comparisons that people have made between Donald Trump and Hitler, right? And
they make comparisons of Trump and Hitler? No.
Like you know, it's been pretty vocal, you know, and people have said, oh, you know, these are the you know, trying to get Muslims to wear IDs, and that's what they did to Jews with the stars, and you know, any number of other comparisons. And though some people have gotten involved and said, hey, wait a second, Donald Trump hasn't done the genocide thing, you know, this is obviously way out of proportion. You know, others would probably venture to say that at one point in time Hitler hadn't committed genocide. He was just a dude who was on his way to committing genocide. So
Well, I
I
mean,
think that I think that the difficulty in this situation is that right now everybody is afraid, right? And fear is a massive motivator of action. But because we don't have a a credible source from which we are getting our fear, we don't know what action to take. So everybody is scared. Everybody wants to do something, but we don't even all have a clear idea of what it is we're afraid of.
the
You
problem
know,
the problem that I have, and this is why this is something that most people should probably be paying attention to, whether they agree with me or not. Hitler didn't do anything. Hitler gave the country what the country was begging to have, what they needed at their time. If you go through and you read Mein Kampf, you actually read through it and listen to the rants that this man had. Now you have to also remember that Mein Kampf wasn't written by Hitler. He was speaking, and someone was writing it down for him. But he goes through and he says, "This is my personal opinion. This is how I feel. This is what I feel should happen." And people rallied behind him. The Nazi Party was already moving. He came to power because he was the most vocal person in it. He was the loudest person speaking and had the masses behind him. And then when it came time for action, everyone turned because he's the face. And they all already wanted to do these things. They just didn't want to be the first person. They didn't want to be the spokesperson. They didn't want to be the fall guy to get all this information done. So, yeah, we've got Donald Trump now who's out there doing very similar. He's just talking, and he's Trumpizing everything he's got, but he's sparking a fire under people in this country who already want to do these things. They already want to be hateful. They already want to eradicate someone. They've tried it once before in their lives, or they feel that it's the appropriate way to do it. They feel some sort of entitlement or some sort of class warfare is appropriate to stop what's coming. But what's coming is getting stronger because of the level of hate and anger that's being developed. So it's six in one hand, half dozen in the other, or which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Well, I want to add to that. I hear the hate and I hear the fear, but I hear more than that, and that stems back to the first item that we're talking about is not having a reliable source, and that is that we don't really know much of anything, right, for true, because we don't have any reliable sources. We do have some sources that tell us certain things, like, for example, well, this isn't really necessarily a good example, but so let's talk about, there was something that, there was an interview with Trump and I believe it was an MSNBC reporter, and they were asking him some questions after his town hall meeting, and Trump was just talking. If you ever listen to Trump, he just pretty much talks all the time, right? And the reporter was asking very pointed questions, trying to get him to respond a certain way. Well, he didn't play that. He just said different things. But throughout the whole interview, which really wasn't an interview, it just happened, they caught him after the town hall meeting, and he was talking with them for a bit. So there were some things that Trump had said specifically, but not specifically in response to the questions asked by the MSNBC reporter, that if you take it out of context, sounded completely wrong. Well, I listened to the entire interview, and Trump never said anything that was as far off as what MSNBC ultimately reported. And there was a video on it that they did, and I watched the video, and the video was clearly edited. It was, the lip syncing was off. It was cut in a number of places. So it was clearly edited for a specific point. Anyway, what I'm getting to is, doesn't this all seem to be either driven towards, I know, I was talking to my wife about this, 1984. You know that book? You know what it's about? It's about getting, yeah, it's about getting the population to be dumb, right? Dumbing down the population by limiting the words that they can use. To me, it feels.
What you talking about that Newspeak?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the same thing. It's like the dumbing down of America by throwing so much crap out there in different perspectives that no one can focus in on what's really happening. And the question that I ask is this intentional, or is it just the nature of the beast? Is it just human nature to come to where we are now or is there something behind all this that's causing this to happen?
I think that it's a dangerous, it's dangerous to get into the idea of, is there a puppet master pulling the strings, Illuminati, something, and I understand that, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, but I do think that the very nature of having this democratization of media is that you don't have a distinct, you don't necessarily have distinct voices. There's an episode of South Park that was, anybody who hasn't watched this current season of South Park, they're back into the political swing of things, and they hit a few things pretty well on the mark. They do an episode about Yelp reviewers, and by the end of the episode, there's this, there's a guy who's decided that he wants to make a stand against the critic who he's called out, and he's specifically calling out Cartman, right? Cartman knows he's being called out, and he shows up, but because the guy calls out like the town's food critic, well, everybody, like all these people in the town are obsessed with Yelp. They're all on Yelp. They're all submitting their reviews and think that their reviews are the most important thing. So next thing you know, like the guy shows up to fight Cartman, and Cartman shows up along with 200 like other people, all of them thoroughly convinced that they are the town's premier critic and that they are the ones who are representing the wants and the needs of the people of South Park. And it's telling, because I think that's what happens, is that as all these different types of media get created from all of these different angles, and to kind of tie back to what we were talking to before, a lot of people are stuck in their own circles and ideas of what is accurate and what is relevant and how they are representing the situation. They feel like they are the one true voice. It's kind of a natural consequence that we end up in these things where nobody really has a clear idea of what's going on, because I don't think anybody has been tasked with that responsibility.
All right, well, let me one up you then. I agree. I tend to agree that that's the case too. I can't imagine Illuminati or anything like that. I can't imagine the DNC is responsible for this, or the RNC, right? It's not that at all.
I can give you that.
I totally agree. It's just human nature is the way it goes. Here's what gets me. What you said makes complete sense. Where I lose it is, how is it that we've lost the ability to think? Don't worry about the information. We don't have the information. We talked about that on this show, right? We don't have the information that we need to make that decision. Yet we can still have a conversation that helps us come to some terms, right? That's what seems to have been lost. Where is that? What has happened to that?
I'd point to our education system.
Yeah.
Oh, I won't give you the education system. No. I would say that the education system plays a big role in that, where students are not taught, proper communication, proper interaction skills, and things of that nature. However, I personally have noticed that I have a problem interacting with people. Like
Wait, stupid people or
people in general, like mass people. Like I go to the store and I speak to people, and people look at me crooked. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here, and I'm being articulate. I'm trying to have a dialogue with these people, and that offends people. They're like, wow. You're speaking all proper. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm speaking proper. I thought this was the most efficient way to communicate, but. Yeah. You get these people where they're not taught the social skills necessary. But I think that the biggest kicker on all of this is going to be, and yes, this is coming from me, is going to be the internet. It's going to be the social connection that we are creating for ourselves online. Nobody's accountable for anything they have to say. No one has to actually have a real opinion. No one even has to talk anymore. Like, people post just memes about their opinions, and our society has become a culture of likes, dislikes, and yes, Yelp reviews. So it's really hard. It's really hard to have a meaningful dialogue. And we live in a world now where people get offended over Starbucks cups. Like, really?
Really offended over Starbucks cups.
The level we've descended to, that now the topic of conversation is, I don't like your Starbucks cup. Where Merry Christmas is offensive to people, where The Confederate flag is a topic of is a polarizing topic because one group of people believes it symbolizes this, another group of people believes it symbolizes this. We all live in a world where, I'm sorry, we have the right to speak our minds and have our own opinions.
Well,
But
we used to.
we used to, but now we worry so much about offending everybody, or we don't care enough about offending anyone to where we don't speak, we don't articulate, we don't engage in meaningful conversations. We engage in arguments, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to introduce Brian. He's been sitting there patiently waiting for me to introduce him. He is an old Army buddy of mine. He and I served one tour in Iraq together, and he is an awesome friend of mine and has decided to grace us with his presence. Brian, welcome. Oh, I think he's on mute, or I lost him. Brian, are you there? Nope. All right, he's there. He's listening. But continue.
Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, well, welcome, Brian. Hopefully you'll make it on audio soon. I do though. I think that this ties back to, I'm sorry. I have a habit of using a story to illustrate a point, right? Like,
that's great.
A car in itself is not dangerous. When you drive a car starts to take actions. It's like, oh, wait a second, you should be responsible about how you use this car. So we go out of our way to tell people, hey, before you use this car, these are the things that you should know. These are how other people are going to use their cars. You should use your car at this particular speed when you are around houses. You should use your car at this particular speed when you're, there's a literacy that you get that we societally say is important for you to have before you engage in car stuff. We don't have that literacy, or I feel like we may not have that literacy training for being on the internet. There are a number there are just, we've all had that situation where we have like that coworker or a parent or a sibling or whoever who gets into this ridiculous argument, and you're like, but really, like, you don't have to do that. It's Facebook. You can just walk away. That's not what's happening here. Nobody's going to change their opinion.
But you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to be the last person. Like I don't know whether this has stopped but back in the bulletin board days, right? It was
Bulletin board. What's that?
Right? If you did something stupid, you got flamed for a little bit, and then people corrected you on what your action should have been, like what you could have done, right? Now right. People are like, don't feed the trolls, but people forget about that all the time. Like I read through some of the interesting comments on Facebook about, pick a topic, right? Mm-hmm. But I read through some of the interesting topics where it's clear that what this person just tried to do was redirect the conversation to something so inflammatory and so stupid that it would just blow up, and that they would just get all the likes, all the comments. They would be somebody's best friend somewhere, and it's like, being internet famous is not that big a deal anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that right there shows the problem, right? Redirecting to something else is not having responsible discussion on the topic. You don't throw it off onto something else unless that other something else is specifically related to the topic, to the issue that you're trying to talk about. If you throw it off, this is what happens in politics too, right? They do that all the time. Senator, what do you think about immigration control? Well, I think, my God, come on, man. Stay focused.
Immigration is important to our country. Well, and you know what else is important to our country?
Yes,
taxes.
Yes.
Like, I saw that as a meme on Facebook where somebody was saying, from now on, I'm going to answer everything the way a politician does. What are you going to do this weekend? I don't know what I'm going to do this weekend, but what I'm going to do this weekend is going to be fantastic.
That was an excellent meme. I love that one.
I was like, and it was perfect. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. But people make jokes about it. People make it funny. But that's what people are become accustomed to. They're not expecting answers from anyone, which is part of the reason why Donald Trump is now the front runner. They're not expecting answers from anyone, but Trump comes out there and slaps you with the most ridiculous responses to things, but he doesn't dance around it. He comes out and he kicks you with it. He's like, well, what do you think we should do about Mexico? Build a wall and kick them all out. Well, whoa. Like, he gave a direct answer. His answer may be very intriguing and fascinating and often just weird, But he gave a direct answer, while everyone else is like, what I think we should do is we should maintain diplomatic relations with so-and-so, and, let's get back to taxes. Wow, guys. Can we just get legitimate answers? Can we just get the facts about what's going on? And people are okay with not getting that fact anymore. People are
Well,
okay.
let's take that and spin it back to the original topic, right? Because I think it's a perfect tie-in. San Bernardino, president's response. The response to address this is gun control. Is that what you got?
Gun control means using both hands in my household, but that is exactly what I didn't understand. You're about to preach gun control from the state of California that has literally some of the. Did you know that you can't have a flash suppressor on your rifle if it's a California-born rifle? You can't have a magazine release, so you can't have a way to quickly change from an empty magazine to a loaded magazine. So you have to have the bullet button so you can change it. You can't have anything larger than a 10-round magazine, and I think pistols are illegal throughout the entire city of Los Angeles. So it's.
Can anybody hear me right now?
Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey.
There you go. I guess I pressed the mute button by accident. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Welcome back, Brian, Dennis, and Josh. Dennis and Josh, that's my buddy Brian.
Howdy, Brian. Glad you can make it.
Glad to be here. I'm listening to you guys, and very informative.
Nice. So to continue on, we've got and Brian, feel free to jump in if you've got an opinion on it. That's the whole point of the hangout is to have a discussion and to get different opinions from different people, and we don't need to all be like-minded, but we all need to agree on one thing, that the conversation needs to happen. That there needs to be an open dialogue, and people need to be able to talk without getting offended and angry. So, we were the president's response. He comes back. Now, are we talking about the Oval Office address, or are we talking about the days leading up to his Sunday address?
No, I think it was the Oval Office address.
Yeah, and the Oval Office address, he did come out and say that we need to get these guns off our streets, that we need tighter gun regulations, that we need to sounds like we need to get a better control over the criminals that are getting our guns, right? Was that the general consensus of what the idea might be?
Yeah. That in order to address this, we need to have what do they call it? That's a new phrase now, and I think it's called sensible gun laws. Sensible gun laws.
Common sense gun laws. It's common sense gun legislation and sensible gun laws.
That's what they're calling it. Okay. My immediate response to that is always, that's a great idea because it works so well in Chicago.
Oh, well, I mean, even still, it's really first and foremost. Find me a criminal who's going to care about the law.
There you go.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do honestly believe that firearms should be in the hands of trained individuals.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to buy a gun, you should be doing. And I forget who I was talking to. I think it might have been you, Dennis, or maybe not.
Uh-oh.
Where we were talking about having a gun driver's license, where basically in order to purchase a firearm, you have to be able to show that you went through some sort of gun safety course, that you went through, you can bring your certificate. It has to be from an authorized person. It doesn't need any additional information, but you get a little card or a little sticker or something that says, I took this course. Oh, you're a safe gun owner. You went through the appropriate training. You've had some kind of training as to how to properly handle your firearm. Now we can show you the selections. I mean, I got my my sailing license, and it has tiers where between for this and this for this amount of training time, you get to be able to charter out anything below a 28-foot boat. For this one, you get between a 28 and a 38-foot boat. And then when you get up to this certain level, you can charter whatever you want. If you want to charter a cruise ship, go for it, right? I feel that something like that would be an easy way to do gun control, but who are we trying to control? The law-abiding citizens or the ones who don't care?
That's right.
But if we were to, were the guns that are used in these shootings, are they illegally procured guns?
Sometimes.
No, they were legally procured.
Well, see, that's the other thing. That's where it's coming back through. is now, originally it was they were legally procured by the assailants. That's what they were saying. They were saying that originally it was the husband and wife team had amassed this arsenal. But then we come to find out
Well,
that it
wait a
was
second. Hold on. Be clear about what you just said. They had amassed the arsenal. That doesn't mean they themselves personally, legally required them.
Oh, no. Remember, originally there were reports that they had gone and they had purchased these firearms legally. They had done it. It was actually reported that way. I remember seeing it on Fox News, and I was confused as to why people were saying we need tighter gun control. These people purchased guns legally in a state that makes it so hard to purchase a gun. So hard to purchase a gun that most people are just like, you know what, F it. I don't care. I don't need a gun. I'm going to use a baseball bat.
Right.
Like
Timothy McVeigh, hello.
Right, there you go. So then you come around. So then you come back around, and you find out now that that doesn't fit the narrative. If these people purchased these firearms legally, and they went through all the stringent background checks, the background checks that make it extremely difficult for criminals or supposed, criminals to purchase a firearm from a gun store, right? If that were the case, and they did it that way, then yes, the system is flawed. But we don't want to admit that the system is flawed. We want to admit that the system works, and we want to make sure that we can push the system harder, right? That we can take California's gun control laws and we can spread them throughout the United States. But what does fit the narrative is, no, they acquired these guns illegally because there is no private transfer in California, at least that I'm aware of, that they had their neighbor purchase these firearms legally and lied on the application.
Yeah, I heard that too, yeah.
You know, that's what I heard on the radio today.
Well, here, let me turn things around, because I like to turn things upside down, because it's all about perspective for me. If you ask just anybody, gun violence is a big issue, right? Says who? Who says? Where's your facts? Where is it?
Wait, we just talked about Chicago.
Well, actually, wait, Brian.
And we can use Chicago, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that.
Here's
the thing.
Wait, Brian will back me up on this one. Brian, do you remember what we used to say in the Army when they said, hey, they said, and when we found they, what we were going to do with they?
Ah, man, you're bringing it back too many years ago.
We were going to whoop they. That's what was going to happen, because they always said what we were going to do. You know, they always had an opinion. They always said what was going to happen. You know, and nobody ever knew who they were.
Yep. I now remember. I mean, the way I feel about gun laws and stuff like that is, even if these people would have went and got it legally, nobody knew their intent. Anybody could go ahead and have a, how can I say this, a malice to wanting to use a weapon. So you could go ahead, you could go through the extensive search. You could even try to obtain a license. You could do any of those things, but it's the intent of the individual. And we can't really tell. I forgot who it was that said it, but it's a human nature. You can't really tell who wants to do harm and who don't. So who pays for that? Do the American people pay for that? The ones that want to own weapons, to protect themselves? I mean, who pays for that?
And I don't mean to suggest that people shouldn't be able to protect themselves.
Oh no.
But I mean, there also are, and perhaps it's difficult for me as I don't own a gun. I don't have a license to own a gun. I have contemplated owning a gun and decided not to, based on my own personal convictions. But I think what we're trying to get at, right, is that like I'm looking at an article from NBC San Diego, right, and it says 2 of the 4 legally purchased firearms used in Wednesday's mass shooting in San Bernardino were purchased in San Diego, and it says suspected shooter bought a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol at Turner Outdoorsman, and an acquaintance purchased another .223 caliber DPMS rifle at the same store on Farouk's behalf.
Now, see, that's another example of how they're taking the narrative. Now, They said a point. The 223 caliber. First and foremost, let's identify what the 223 caliber
I
is.
was going to ask that question because there's a picture here of 4 guns, and 2 of them are handguns. 2 of them are not handguns.
Right.
So
So what I'm betting, what you describe to someone like me is you got two AR-15s, which are yeah, they're military style rifles. They are what the army uses. They're what law enforcement uses. They're what people use to hunt. They're what my wife uses for competition shooting. They're what my daughter uses for competition shooting. So they're very versatile firearms. Now the 223 round shares the diameter. Now what makes it a 223 is it's a rifle round that's longer and it's got more powder behind it, but it shares the diameter of that of a 22 caliber pistol. Now a 22 caliber pistol is what we commonly like to call a critter gun because you aren't killing anybody with a 22. I mean, you can, but you have to be a really good shot to kill someone with this. But this is rifle ammunition. Now the pistols were likely 9mm pistols. Now we don't hear anybody chasing after the handguns because, well, if you take away handguns from people, all of those politicians, those rappers, and everybody else who believe they need these types of firearms are still going to get them. So I mean, I'll give you an example of the ATF's fantastic gun legislation. Okay, they made it illegal for you to have what's called a short barrel rifle, which is a rifle that has a barrel shorter than I think 14 inches or 16 inches. Okay, now what the arms manufacturers did was like, oh, okay, well, we won't call it that anymore. We're going to classify it as a pistol, and we're going to make a 10-inch barrel. So the ATF couldn't regulate that. So they're like, oh, okay. So now they tried to one-up it one more time. The way the media, and even in that particular article puts it out, is they want you to understand, hey, this is a 223. This is a 223, caliber pistol. For the general populace, they're going to say 223. It's 223, caliber. What is that? It's got to be huge. It's got to be meant to just kill people. You don't need that. No, that's not what it means. So that's, that goes back to earlier of let's just give the right information and the narrative behind it so people understand what they're reading. But people don't go and look for those facts anymore.
But I think if we were to I think part of the macro of the situation, right, is we can have a discussion about the caliber of the bullets. We can talk about the intent of the person to obtain a gun to do competition or to hunt or to harm another person. We can talk about any of these different situations, but I do feel like inevitably this all really ties back to an idea of what action do we take. Right. I mean, because I think that if we can look at the number of shootings that have taken place over the past few years, we can talk about school shootings. We can talk about mass shootings such as these. Like there are obviously laws aren't intended to stop. They will not prevent criminal action. Criminal action by definition is action that takes place outside of the law. So I understand that, but I do think that the nature of the argument is that by making these tools easily accessible, it increases the odds that these particular actions take place.
Where's the proof?
I agree.
This is one of the things that I believe in. Like I'm a big Second Amendment believer, but I do believe, like in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, they have free classes for people that want to own a obtain a motorcycle license, and they actually give free classes for that. I think that is something that could probably be incorporated, because to obtain a license, you got to actually pay for it. Now, you pay for your driver license to drive a car, but driving is actually more of a privilege than a right. The sailing, all these things are privileges to be able to do. Home defense and to be able to obtain, that shouldn't be a privilege. That's your right.
But I mean, the definition of the difference between a privilege and a right, I mean, is going to vary based on your location, right? So if I live in a city like Portland, which has frequent and spread out access to public transit, we might talk about how driving is a privilege, right? Because theoretically, based on now, and this is a big theory, but theoretically, you can get to, if you need to get to your job, if you need to be able to, if we're talking about home defense, we're talking about the ability to make a living, the tools with which you can make a living to get to work, things like that, are different, but maybe readily available. Whereas my hometown of Rockford, like, public transit is not a viable option for anybody who reliably wants to be able to get to their job. And yet, so the difference between a right and a privilege is going to vary based on your situation. I think in a similar sense, needing to use a gun to protect your household from criminal intentions. I mean, you can cross the street in San Francisco and move from a neighborhood to where you would figure you'd never need a gun to a neighborhood where you feel like you always need a gun. We're talking about trying to find ways to enact national legislation over a gigantic population spread over multiple geographic areas with tons of different cultures and tons of different opinions about the things that are rights and the things that are privileges, the things that are wants and the things that are needs, right? So, I think that in the grand scheme of the discussion, it's a matter of figuring out, like, because to me, I feel like thus far we've taken no action, right? Like, these shootings keep showing up, and we don't do anything. Like,
Well,
we
problem is
talk about them more, but I mean, is the answer then to give
Why are we
everybody
talking about
guns and give everybody training? Is the answer to take away all guns? Like, what is the thing that if we just did this, everything would be fine?
Well, let's look at it this way. Like they want to take away access for being able to sell, to be able to easily acquire firearms or things that are illegal, right? Last time I checked, meth, cocaine, and up until recently, marijuana weren't available over the counter. You couldn't walk into a store and just purchase them. You actually have to go out of your way to get them. So the people who want them in any way, shape, or form are going to get them. They've cracked down on all of that. They've put in legislation. Cops are on, notice for all of this. They've got all of the things to do it. But the people who are really genuinely out to get those illegal items are going to get them, and it's going to be the same with guns. And all that's going to leave now are the criminals with more guns and the people with less. So now you're going to see people who are going to be, oh, well, I didn't have a gun. That bad guy there had a gun. Because of legislation, my family got murdered. You don't even have to kill anyone at that point. I've got a gun. I can shoot you. You don't have a gun. It's reasonably assumed I know you don't have a gun because you're a law-abiding citizen. You're a white-collar American who's not going to have the ability to defend yourself. I'm going to harm you.
But I mean, so if we were to take the current state of America, right, where we have a number of guns, we can assume that a number of people do not have guns, but the existence of guns happens, right? If we were to look at a place like, I mean, we've talked about Chicago, we talk about Chicago's gun laws, but I mean, the people who are using guns are generally, or it seems, are using them if we're talking about black-on-black crime or gang violence. If we're talking gang violence in particular, they're using them against other people who also have guns. Right? Like, I mean, the idea that one person has a gun does not automatically stop another person from using a gun on that person.
Well, wait, let's back that up then. Because you don't hear in the news, you're not hearing about these black-on-black or these gun violences or these actual shootouts with people. You're not really hearing that. You're hearing about the guy who walked into a Planned Parenthood, an elementary school, or a government building and opened fire on people that were unarmed.
But that's because it's boring to hear about black-on-black and gang violence. Like because the news cycle has done with that. They know that we all know about Chicago. They know that we know about Compton. They know that if they do a news story about those things, people are going to flip over to Everybody Loves Raymond because those things aren't going to scare them.
And why do they want to do that? I have to ask this again.
Because they don't make money if nobody watches their news show.
No, not that. Why is there a national discussion at all about gun violence? Where is any proof, where is the evidence, where are the facts that support that it is required, that it is necessary, that we have such an urgent issue here that we have to do something about it? Where are those numbers? Where are those facts?
So, and I am legitimately asking this for clarification's sake. So the suggestion is that we don't have an issue that we need to resolve about gun violence?
I think we don't have an issue as severe as it appears to be in the media. I think we have other issues that are much more pressing than gun violence. If you look at the history, the numbers that we have, the real facts that we have about gun violence in the United States, ultimately it's gone down over the last 20, 30 years. If the ultimate number of violence, gun violence, has gone down over the last 10, 20 years, then why are we making it such a big issue?
Because the
Right?
internet has created a platform where everyone and their brother can discuss it. Where, I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. When I want to know about news in a general area, I don't turn to the major news outlets anymore because I can't get it fast enough because the major news outlets don't know what's really going on. But I can turn to Twitter and I can get all the information there, and I can get hundreds of people that are telling me in 140 characters or less, this guy's shooting down people with a bazooka. Okay?
Which makes
So
it
then
sound huge, doesn't it?
it does. It makes
But
it
is it?
sound massive.
That's my question.
That's my
So when
point.
you look at some numbers, do you know there are more people who are let's just talk about mass shootings. Mass shootings as a part of gun homicides is a fraction of the percentage of people who are killed in gun homicides altogether. Okay? The number of people who are killed with bats is more than the number of people, and I mean baseball bats, not flying critters.
I was going to say Batman,
Yeah,
man. He doesn't kill people.
exactly. By Batman. The number of people who are killed by bats, the number of people who are killed by knives is more than the number of people who've been killed in mass shootings. So why are we making gun violence the issue? There are more people who are killed in vehicles monthly than there are the number of mass shootings in a year.
I feel like though this argument sets up a false dichotomy, right? Like the idea of people are concerned about guns, people are talking about guns right now.
Yeah, but
because
why?
of
That's
mass
why I asked the
shooting.
question. Why? It's being pushed down our throats.
I agree. I mean,
But the idea that people are, just because people are being killed in multiple situations that are not mass shootings with guns, does not mean that talking about guns in the context of mass shootings is irrelevant. Mass shootings may be a small number of the situations that occur that create gun violence and gun death, but that does not mean that it automatically means that it's not a relevant conversation.
Absolutely true, and that wasn't my point. My point
The
is,
point
why
is-
is it a much larger issue than any other issue?
well, because you're
What
in
I
society right now.
what
Go ahead, Brian.
is that people. Thank you. No, what I've seen is a lot of people are talking about the AR-15s, the Bushmasters, the rifles, but in reality, when you talk about just gun violence, there's not somebody running around with an AR-15 shooting somebody to rob the corner store. They're using a pistol, and that's what I don't understand. Why is everybody concerned with the rifles and not concerned with the pistols? Since that's what's used to on most robberies and assaults and stuff like that. It's pistols, not rifles.
And what I'm concerned about is that I know that that's true, I hear you, but the total number of those types of incidents have gone down over the years. Why is it still such a big issue now?
Well, here's
A decline in something does not mean that the issue has been eliminated.
Oh,
You
okay.
could say that somebody's
I'm
fever
not
has
worried about
declined
that.
from 105 to
I'm not worried about
102,
that.
and they'd still have a fever.
I got you. I'm with it, but don't explode it to be bigger than it is.
I agree.
But that's completely subjective, right? Your idea of
Well, let's look at the facts.
No, the entire, we can talk about cancer, right? We can talk about the massive amounts of money that go into breast cancer research, and breast cancer awareness, and people and athletes wear pink shoes for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and all of these different things, right? There are any number of cancers, lung cancer included, right? Lung cancer research doesn't get a ton of funding, and that's because people assume that lung cancer is something that you do to yourself because we hear about it as an association of cigarette usage. So even though there are people out there who get lung cancer and haven't smoked a day in their lives, they're not able to profit from the outpouring of generosity that takes place in something like breast cancer research. So, I mean, regardless of, we can talk about hard numbers, we can talk about the number of people who are affected, but the reason that people get invested in a particular situation is the closeness that they feel to the situation or the closeness they actually have to the situation. So
Does that make
facts are completely can be manipulated by whoever happens to be conveying them to say that, oh, well, this is either a big deal or isn't a big deal. I mean, base level economics talks about, well, we can just change the scale of the graph that we're using and then make 50,000 look like a giant number, or we can make it look like a tiny number.
It's all about perspective. Now, I mean, we all understand why breast cancer is a big deal, is because everybody's fond of boobs. Like, everybody is. I don't know anybody who isn't.
Mhm.
But the whole retrospect, the whole idea with gun control is the same aspect. Now it's a big deal that everybody's making of all of these guns and all of this violence and all these things that are happening. And this is a relatively new phenomenon. We didn't have this back in the days of, Martin Luther King, and we didn't have this back in the early 80s. I mean, we heard about the gang violence and the gang members going out and shooting each other and dealing with all that other stuff and all the wars. But it wasn't classified as gun violence. It was gang violence, and it was swept under the rug, in my opinion, because it was black on black, because, it really doesn't matter anyway. But that's a whole nother show. We're moving forward into gun control right now because we're on the verge of where everyone, where you have a vast group of people that believe that we've got a Muslim terrorist as our president. We've got another group of people that believe that the federal government is doing nothing but creating a society of dependent people and are eventually going to come and take our guns. The narrative of Donald Trump being put together as Hitler did very similar. Hitler disarmed his population by making it illegal for guns to be owned by normal citizens. For Jews, what was that?
It was loud.
for the Jews did not have guns. And then it made it all great, made the entire society believe that gun control was a necessity and that we needed to turn in our guns. So everybody needed to turn in their guns. What is that? And then all of a sudden came back around, and invaded and started going through and just slaughtering and abducting people. And people without a gun, without the ability to defend themselves, were easy targets. Now, that is the argument of the major gun control of the NRA. The Second Amendment is meant for people to be able to defend themselves against a tyrannical government, and that's the bottom line.
There's one other piece, just for clarification. We're supposed to have the inalienable right to defend ourselves, and guns would be one of those things.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's so we've got the picture painted where now the government and the mass media are trying to push that all of our guns, are trying to convince all of us that all of our guns need to be turned in, that all of our guns need to be tighter controlled, that we need to have a registry, or we need to have some sort of other control over it so that the government can intervene. Well, the problem is I personally believe we should have smaller government, not more government.
Yeah,
The bigger the government gets, the harder it's going to be to do that. But the first step to having a totalitarian society where we have a dictator, or we have somebody sitting in that chair that can basically tell the world, tell the entire country, this is what you're going to do, or I'm going to declare martial law and come kick in your door, is take away your ability to defend yourself. And that's a genuine fear through a good chunk of the United States.
See, what I believe is that all this gun control talk is pretty much coming from people that just been brainwashed. Honestly, it come from the media. The media scares people, and you hear all this. It's like in New York. In New York, there is a lot of crime, but yet, if you speak to people from New York, they do not want to have ownership of a weapon. They just don't. They have been conditioned to believe that a weapon is not going to help you. A weapon is not going to protect you. A weapon is bad. I have a lot of friends that they will not even go to a shooting range with me because of their belief. And I just think that it's just been the media, some of the politicians, just fighting on gun control, and they just believe in this. And then the more that you have people like-minded, the more you're gonna have people pushing it, more media exposure and stuff like that. And I just don't agree with it. I just really don't.
So, well, I'm gonna try and drive back to this then. Then what do we do, right? Because I feel like as somebody who runs in a lot of liberal circles, I could reverse every sentence that you just had to describe that situation and would be describing exactly the same description of people who are advocates for gun control, describing people who are not advocates for gun control.
And you're right.
That they believe that, you know, people have been brainwashed. They believe that guns are good. I've been in all these situations and talked to people, and they're in areas, and they, you know, are in areas that have crime, and they don't want to give up their guns, and they believe, you know, at any of those situations, any of those things, they believe that people have been brainwashed. All of these different ideas. It's exactly the same rhetoric, pointing to two completely polar opposite situations, right? Is that just based on the people that you happen to be having the discussion with, that's what's going to make sense for that answer. So in the context of, we keep having a discussion about guns and violence, right? If the three of you were policymakers, right? If the three of you were policymakers and we're going to say, these are the things that we would do to resolve issues that we are currently having with guns and violence, what would those things be?
Well, I hope you're not asking me.
Well,
I mean,
all of us.
Well, I mean, all three of you have said, right, a number of things. I mean, you just said that you agreed with the statement that the media has been the media has brainwashed people into believing that having weapons won't be good for their health or whatever. So what are the answers then? What are the things that we should be doing as a society to alleviate these issues? I understand that there is a discussion on the table that there is no issue.
Well, there is no. There's the okay. So
No, I never said that. I said it was not as big an issue as it's being portrayed.
well, even still,
We have all kinds of. We have issues with people dying because of medical malpractice. 120,000 people a year die from that. 11,000 people die from gun violence. But the what is it? 300 something people that die in mass shootings alone. That makes this the biggest issue. What about the 120,000 people that die from medical malpractice? Why is that not a big issue at all? My point is not that it's not an issue. My point is that it's such a big issue out of context.
So I understand the concept of context, but we also are a ridiculously large nation with a ridiculously large number of resources with which to handle a large swath of issues simultaneously. So the idea that we can't do anything about medical malpractice because we're all talking about mass shootings right now is not practical. Also, I'm not a person who's going to be able to give I might not be able to pose the answer as to what we do about medical malpractice at not being a doctor. So
see, Josh, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. See, we're coming up on the end, so we're going to have to make a decision whether we want to go further down this path or not, if we all have the time to continue doing so. But that's the purpose of this whole show. That's the point, is to have a tabletop, a discussion. And we're not having these discussions around the world, around the nation. We're having people who have been polarized to either side of it. And until we can fix that, we can't have a meaningful dialogue as to what we can do to control the issues, regardless of their size, regardless of their scale, or regardless of whether or not they're being portrayed in an unfair light. See, if we had a table of people, if we had regular conversations with people that showed, hey, look, this is what's going on, this is what we know, this is what's happening in other parts of the world. Oh, by the way, yeah, gun violence with all these mass shootings, that's kind of an issue. That's a big deal, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. We can begin to drill down to the why is this such a big deal? We can be
what can we do about it, to Josh's point?
Right, and then we can start to, once we address the problem, we can start finding solutions.
One of the things that we can do that will help on both sides of the spectrum is gun awareness, gun education. That's one of the things that I believe that can help. And if you own a weapon, I mean, like I said, I believe in the Second Amendment. I have weapons in my household, but if Joe Schmo has a gun, just bought a gun, you better believe that I would love for Joe Schmo to be educated in the use and maintenance of that weapon. You know, and I think that awareness, information and awareness will help a lot in both spectrums.
But it's not. But the system isn't designed that way anymore. The system is designed to have it segregated with gun people and non-gun people. It's meant to have people that want guns and people that don't want guns. It's not that if we can get down to the conversation of, hey, let's come to the table and develop an educational program or a system that requires you to have taken some sort of gun safety or gun training course. I don't need to know anything about you, but you have to be able to present the certificate of doing so. And if we want to have some place where they can do it for free, so be it. Where you have been trained in the operation of your firearm, a basic firearm safety course. If we were to able to bring that to the table on a mass topic or a mass conversation, I think it would solve both problems. It would, one, identify the main issue and get people talking, you know, and I think two, we'd have a lot of people out there who would know the difference between who would know the difference between a bullet button and a selector switch. Okay, so it's
fertilizer
really now, and fertilizer. It's the media, and Brian, you weren't on for this one. The media is driving a narrative that supports a political agenda. Now, that political agenda is to get guns out of the hands of its citizens. Period. That's the bottom line. Why? I don't understand. I don't know. But that is what everybody wants to do.
Well, let's not forget that the media is a wide term that envelops multiple people who, including people who do not want guns out of the hands of people. I mean, I understand that, you know, anybody's concept of the mainstream media generally involves media that they are not consuming. But I mean, there are also tangible portions of the media out there that are all about keeping guns in the hands of the American people, and that's a viable portion of the discussion as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, gentlemen, we have gone to, I think we're at 2 hours for this. Do we want to continue, or do we want to conclude and probably pick up this conversation next week?
I would be down to pick up the conversation. I really do think that we're creating a good space here where, you know, maybe people can listen to this and then decide, hey, wait a second, there were some good ideas there. Maybe these are things that we should follow up on.
There was a good conversation and people weren't arguing or violent or...
Nobody got shot.
No one got shot.
Nobody got shot.
What is that? Is that beeping? Is it somebody
getting shot?
I think that was somebody getting shot.
See, let's both be soon.
Darn, almost made it through the entire episode. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to get ready to conclude this episode and figure out how I want to publish it. I think it came out fantastic. I think for the first tabletop discussion titled WTF America, has hit on some good points. We got a little off topic, but we'll figure out how to stay on that later. So I think we will figure out a time to do this again probably next week or earlier in the week or maybe further in the evening so we can get a lot more participation. But I think it worked out well.
Good,
Yeah,
good. I hope you keep going.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone out there who's listening or who's going to be listening, and click the stop broadcast button. Have a good evening, and give us your suggestions in the comment sections that are probably going to be below this if it gets published on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, send us some messages. Send me a message. Let's see if we can get this into something that's actually going to be larger.